Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Coaching for Millennials. I am your host, Jose Miguel Longo, and I'm here. It's the middle of July. I'm back from vacation. I was in vacation in Provincetown, enjoying a week in the sun, hanging out with some friends, enjoying the weather and all the things. And I can't help but reflect on so many things that have happened in our world in the last 2.5 weeks since I've been gone. I mean, things that were happening before I was gone, things that were happening when I left, and obviously here recording a new episode for you. But all that to say is that we have a lot to cover. So, first, I want to dive into some things relevant to the state of our country. So, if you're listening to this episode and you live outside of the US, just know that the world of politics, as it's known, is changing every single day and rapidly. Originally, I had thought I wanted to do an episode um, about a week and a half ago with someone who is, how do I say this, trying to be politically correct here. I guess someone who is more on the Republican side of things versus the Democratic side of things. Um, Politics is something that I love to talk about with my partner, but I only talk about it openly with people who I feel comfortable talking about it. But I feel it's also a topic that in our world today we need to address with an open heart because our values and our democracy and our livelihoods are at stake for so many people based on how the world can change. And what we saw in the last 2 weeks was one, a current president who is, I don't want to say he's declining because that's unfair. I don't know the status of his health, although he is an older gentleman, um, has decided to move aside and step aside and allow his vice president to become the um, official nominee for the Democratic Party, who is Kamala Harris. So that happened very recently in the last 48 hours, 72 hours. And then we have on the Republican side just last week. This is right when I was getting my vacation started. I had just gone to Provincetown on Friday, and this happened Saturday. Our former president Donald Trump was shot basically with an attempted assassination. So such a big things happening in our world. I don't know about you, but for me, I've felt since the debate back in June that our country is at risk. It still is. I mean, things can change. We don't know. There's 105 days to the election. It's so important as, you know, people who are citizens of this country to use their civic duty to vote. And regardless of what side of the aisle you sit, it's important for you to exercise that. It's also important to understand what is on the chopping block, what is at risk, and what is important to each individual American that's part of this nation, this great country that we live in, and what values from both sides of the aisle are meaningful to them. When I was thinking about having a conversation around this, and I should start with saying this. This episode isn't just about this, but I wanted to lead with this because it's very top of mind with me. I feel like, this podcast is called Coaching for Millennials. Our generation is shaping the future of our country. And whether you live in the United States and you're a millennial, or you live outside of the United States and you're a millennial, it still impacts you in some way, shape, or form because our country has such a huge impact on the world globally. And we kind of have been known as a country to set the stage for so many different things when it comes to the economy, when it comes to trade agreements, when it comes to protecting our nations and our governments. And those things are important. So it's important to really have these conversations regardless of what side you're on. I'm going to stop for a second and say, I hope to find a political reporter or someone who's involved in every single day the side of politics that I don't know to speak more candidly about this conversation. I want to bring people from both sides of the aisle to hear both views. I think that the race just got really hot. And the fact that we now have the first female multiracial electable candidate who is going to be the next president of the United States, who is now running, changes the game in every which way or form. It is no lie. I am a Democrat. I am not uber conservative, but there are some things that I feel like I have somewhat of a conservative view on. And if you had asked me, back in 2001, which was the first time I had the opportunity to vote, I voted for Bush. It was during 9/11. It seemed like it was the wise choice to make. And I think it's up to the person who you're seeing in office and who's going to do the work and who's going to be there for you and not personally be there for you. But when it comes to government, the president isn't the only person that's governing the country. It's the people they put in their administration. And at the time, for me in 2001, that was Bush's second term of office. So it really wasn't necessarily the fact that, oh, I just voted for Bush. Bush was already there, and it made sense considering that our country had just seen a terrorist attack. But looking at the things that impact my life, my family, day in and day out, I struggle to say, yeah, I'm going to be a Republican when I know what they're trying to do as a party. I think the biggest challenge that the Republican Party has right now is who they have as their current nominee and everything that person stands for. I don't believe that the Republican Party is as bad as it is right now. I don't believe that people who are Republicans are malicious people, but I think that their values are conflicted because of the rhetoric that has been publicized into our media and into our TVs and into our phones and into our lives. And if these individuals really are racist or really are wanting to pull apart the foundation of our country and of our values as a nation, it's really sad if that's really how these people feel. It's one thing to be an uber MAGA person, but it's a whole other thing to be like, well, I'm a Republican, that's where my values stand, and that's who I'm voting for. There's a huge difference there. And that's the conversation I really want to have, is to really understand, I feel like we as humans sometimes find ourselves looking at things from a very one-sided perspective, and that makes things very hard to listen to multiple perspectives. I like to challenge people, but I like to be challenged as well. And I'm good for having a healthy debate. So all that to say is that I will step aside from that and get to the root of the conversation that we're here to have today. But I felt like it was really important to just address the fact that Kamala Harris is now the Democratic nominee for the Democrats, and she is going to she's running for president. It's happening. It is happening now, today, July 23rd. So I digress. And then if any of you out there who are listening to this and you are a Republican and you're part of the United States and you want to have a conversation about the politics and the state of our politics and what your values, I'm here for it. Please message me, send me a DM, find me. I really want to talk to someone. I'd prefer for the person to be a journalist who that's what they do. They're a political journalist in this case. But hey, you know what? I will talk to anybody. Okay. So this episode today is really going to be focused on a book. I wrote an ebook. I wrote this book about a month or so ago. I finished it. I have been toying with the idea of how do I introduce this to my audience? How do I introduce it to the world? And I have many ideas for this book. Essentially, I had been thinking about writing a formal book, not something that was digital, but something in print. And I had been talking to a publisher for about a couple of years now about how to bring this to life. And they gave me lots of ideas and suggestions. And I knew that it was going to take me a while to do that. But I also wanted to reframe the idea of a book and say, you know what? Everyone has some form of an ebook out there. I created the freebie guide that y'all can access anytime. It's free. It's a free guide. Go check it out. Uh, beacons.ai/coaching for millennials. It is free. That guide is specific to helping you get unstuck and get clarity in your mindset. And it's focused on using the mindset shift and the mindset awareness of growth while also accessing and tapping into your emotional intelligence. This book is a mindset roadmap, I would say, that's focused on millennials. So, if you're not a millennial, I think this book can help you because the outline of this book is a roadmap and it's coaching strategies for success in life and work. So, the title of the book, let me tell you that: The Millennial Mindset, Coaching Strategies for Success in Life and Work. And the book has 9 chapters. So it's not anything that is very long. I think it's about 70 to 80 pages long, not very long at all. Um, and that's intentional. The purpose of it is to help people who are in a, let's just say, in a space and place in their life where they're really needing some deep advice. The book is strategies. At each chapter includes information that's relevant to life, relevant to career, relevant to finance, relevant to work, relationships. It has a journey and it follows it in a really continuous way. I had so much fun putting it together from so many perspectives. I feel like the deeper I get into understanding my generation as a millennial, the more excited I get for our future as a generation. We get a lot of we get a lot of bad rap as millennials. I remember when the conversations around generations was happening in the early 2000s, and I was picking up a lot on how millennials always were the entitled ones, the ones that were me, 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 me. And I sat back and was like, where the hell do these people get this information from? And I felt as though there was a missed opportunity for probably for me and maybe many others who might be in this space. If anybody else is a millennial coach or anybody else whose podcast or experience in their work is around millennials, I'm here to have a deeper conversation with that. I feel as though we have so much to offer to this world. And that was why I led in with the whole conversation about the state of our politics, state of our government, but also the fact that we need support continuously, whether it's mentorship, whether it's self help, or our family and our friends. And this book is your guide. This book is a self help book. It's an educational guide around the millennial mindset, but also topics that have always been critically important to millennials. So let me dive into highlighting the chapters of the book. So I'm giving you a breakdown of the book. I mentioned already there's 9 chapters. The first chapter is understanding the millennial mindset. And this particular chapter highlights the challenges millennials face. I mentioned before how we've gotten a bad rap, but also the fact that in our generation, we've had multiple economic downturns. We've seen the rise and the fall of several political parties, but also some challenges in the economy that have been impacted by the economy, but also by our government, but also by a pandemic or a financial crisis when it comes to housing, like so many different things. So there's that. There's also an awareness and understanding of the values that millennials have. We're not just the people who were the first generation to enter the world of work in a digital era, but we're also the generation that brought the digital era to Generation X. And when we think about that, we were the first generation that created a multi-generational workforce. And my friend Lindsay Pollack, her books are focused on multi-generational workforce. She does a really good job at outlining that. I'm not here to talk about that, but we were that generation. And so I think those are important facets that are included in the book. There's also, and for chapter 2, which is specifically around millennial entrepreneurs, the importance of setting clear business goals and creating a solid business plan, how to address the fears and failure and how to overcome them when you have a business, understanding and building a personal brand. These are all things that I have had a personal experience doing and that I actually do on a day-to-day basis. The evolution of my coaching practice is based on helping people uncover their mindset and also get them past some of those fears that they need to uncover, while also shifting their mindset into a growth mindset, but also looking at their emotional intelligence. So a lot there to really consider and evaluate. On chapter 3, we dive into millennials who are creatives. We have a whole generation of folks who are out there creating amazing stuff. You talk about Canva, you talk about Upwork, you talk about Fiverr. These are all things that in our generation we've seen that are created by millennials, but also from a perspective of artists and art. So if you're a person who thinks that you're creative or feel like you want to be creative, there's a discussion in the book around how do you find inspiration and overcoming creative blocks. There's also the discussion about creativity and balance and practicality. It's also a conversation around marketing and promoting and getting some tips around that. So I go deep into different areas that really help the person, you, to really understand what you can do. You're going to get something out of every single chapter. I promise you that. But ultimately, you may find that you will go back to one chapter versus the other, or maybe you feel like the whole book really resonates with you. So let's keep moving along. Chapter 4 is around millennial leaders. We've seen this happen in our world. We are seeing it happen right now in front of our eyes. There are so many people jumping into becoming leaders in our country, but also in technology, in the space of education, in the tech space. And it's just amazing to see how we're catapulting ourselves as a generation to really continue to have a conversation around challenging the status quo while also being high performers and creating and building high performing teams, while also understanding that there needs to be work life balance as a leader and creating that for the workplace. So, a lot goes into that particular chapter. Um, I also talk about strategies on handling conflict and managing change, which is really important, was something that's dear and near to my heart. Chapter 5 is focused around millennial students. So, if you don't know, the millennial generation extends from 1981 to 1996. So, some of those millennials may be leaving a college career. Some of them may be returning back to school, or some of them may be entering school or a career in academia for the first time. And I thought this was important because as we see more generations come to the forefront, we have to become lifelong learners. We need to become students that continuously learn about how we adapt and embrace new skills, how we teach ourselves how to do multiple things, and how we can pivot very easily. The world of work continues to shift every single day. This is something that I study really closely. But I also realize that when it comes to the idea of learning and becoming a student, it takes that continuous momentum of looking at the goals and the priorities to the success that you're trying to achieve. And in this chapter, we discuss how we can set academic goals, how you can create healthy study habits, how you can overcome procrastination, how do you stay motivated, and also how do you manage stress while achieving a a good work-life balance. So, really important chapter. Chapter 6 is focused on relationships. Now, this one is a really juicy one. I say because it talks about the understanding of building healthy and fulfilling relationships. I think that our generation has been very vocal about what we want and what we need, which is why I think Xers and boomers have continuously bashed us for saying that we are too focused on ourselves. But when we've grown up in a society that has taught us time and time again, do this and don't worry about it, or do this and don't worry about it. And when we reach that point of adulthood, I'm talking about your 30s, not your 20s, and maybe your 40s now, you're finding yourself that you have to value yourself first above all things. And when it comes to relationships, you need to be able to effectively communicate your thoughts and your feelings and your emotions to be successful in those relationships. One of the things I talk about in this chapter and I offer tips on is on how to create effective communication, but also how to resolve conflicts. Marriages and relationships are work, and they're hard to navigate in this era. So much has come through when we talk about relationships and marriages that we're seeing instrumental numbers of people, not instrumental, but insurmountable numbers of people, going for a divorce and relationships that are broken. And a lot of it comes down to communication. That's the number one thing that causes that. There's other things, obviously, but primarily communication. So, really good chapter to dig into. Chapter 7 is about financial success. This one's a hard one because I felt like, shit, this is something I'm still working on myself, but I think that it's a growth mindset. You have to continuously work on this. But also it's important that I pull the resources that I know the most from and I include that in this chapter. So I discuss budgeting and saving strategies. I talk about the importance of investing and growing wealth for the future. And I also share some tips on managing student loans and building credit. Chapter 8 is specifically around the millennial self care. One of the things that I think our generation has done well is recognizing and hopefully vocalizing the importance of self care. I can't emphasize this enough. Self care isn't just the care of taking a day off, it's also cultivating a positive mindset. It's also cultivating mindfulness. It's also cultivating awareness around your mental health and recognizing when you're not okay instead of saying that you're okay. I offer tips on how you could prioritize self care and setting boundaries around it, but also how do you cultivate a healthy work life balance? Because that's how we get in trouble, is when we don't prioritize that for ourselves. And lastly, chapter 9 is around personal development. In this chapter, I discuss how do you create personal goals and creating a vision board, one of my favorite things to do, and talking about how do you overcome limiting beliefs and building confidence. You could see here the overlap and correlation to my free guide when I talk about how do you gain clarity and how do you get unstuck and how do you take actionable steps. This particular chapter has some overlap with that. So lots there to kind of dive into. As I mentioned already, the book has 9 chapters. I also said that it has about 50. I said it had about 80 pages. I lied. It has 51 pages. So it's even shorter than what I said. I looked over here because I have it open on my screen. So it's an ebook, right? This ebook is for sale on my website at beacons.ai/coaching for millennials. I will put that in the show notes. It's on sale for $7. The reason I'm selling it for $7 is because it's not officially published. When I work to get an ISBN number and I work to get it published on Amazon and on Kindle and all those other places, I will then structure the pricing as I feel that it needs to be. But it's not going to be more than $15, I can tell you that much. It is a short book. I felt like it was something that I needed to do. I felt like it was something that I had in me and I could do quickly with some resources that I already had. I had the guide that I had created. So while I'm in this space of pulling together what the identity of coaching for millennials is and the future of coaching millennials when it comes to my coaching packages, my career packages, and all the things, I felt that I could work on this book and very easily pull it together to create something that could be a foundation. I also titled it primarily Coaching for Millennials Volume 1, The Millennial Mindset, because I feel that there could be multiple versions of this. So stay tuned as I grow with what I'm developing and creating, but also with how the podcast and the coaching practice grows. So that was a lot to kind of uncover there when it comes to the book itself. I mentioned all the different things that the book has to offer, but I feel like when I think of encompassing it all, kind of like what would be the primary takeaway, um, I love to find out what makes millennials tick. And understanding millennials and their mindset is something that I feel like I've learned based on the work that I've done over the last decade and a half, working at colleges and universities, but also being side by side and working with millennials and also being a leader to Gen Zers and Gen Xers and Gen Y and all those things. So I feel like I know it well and I've done my research. At the same time, the idea of this book is to help people understand what their values are and what really motivates them, how people find that they can create work life balance, and how people really look at how they can move from a place of being stuck to being unstuck and have clear direction. And every single chapter, like I said before, offers that from one page to another. 51 pages, that's including the cover page, so 50 pages of text, um, is really clean and easy to read. $7 is all you have to spend, and you have a free book, a free guide as a companion. So if you're ready to dive deeper and these strategies unlock your full potential, I encourage you to grab the copy of my book, The Millennial Mindset. And I look forward to talking about the book more because I think that this is going to be something that's going to evolve to something bigger. And I'm really excited for that. So without further ado, go to my website, beacons.ai/coaching for millennials, grab the free guide, enter your email, get the ebook at $7. And I can't wait to hear your thoughts on it. I would love to hear your thoughts on it. Let me know on social. Follow me at Coaching for Millennials or at Jose Miguel Longo. Excuse me, I almost gave you my email. And let me know what you think. Other than that, I hope you have a fabulous day. Stay tuned to next week's episode because I have a great guest coming on. And I hope you have an awesome week. See you later, booze. Bye.